morning, everybody. It is Sunday. I am wrapping up my scouting for this morning. Extremely foggy. Haven't heard a whole lot. I heard a gobble pretty far off, but I just want to take this opportunity to go over mouth calls today, and then I'll do one final video over slate. Mouth calls are, personally, I think they are the most difficult for people. Some people can just pick them up and run them. Some people can't. I don't know if it has to do with the roof of their mouth or just how it fits or whatever, but it does take technique, and I'm going to try to explain the best ways to use a mouth call if you're a beginner. Not all mouth calls are equal, in my opinion. I've used quite a few mouth calls, and I have found my thing that I like, and I guess that's sort of what you have to do too if you want to use mouth calls as well. You got to just sort of try them out and see if they work for you, and see if they sound good for you, and if they work for you, then there's no reason for you to go try anything else, right? And that's how I am too. There's always companies that are developing all sorts of new kind of mouth calls and everything. Don't be afraid to go try some. There are some that have been in business for a while. There's some that are new. Don't be afraid to try something different. You don't have to go mainstream. You can go custom. There's some really good companies out there. I just picked this one up. It's called a Cluck custom call. These guys have a whole huge line of mouth calls and turkey calls in general. They're all veteran owned and operated out of Pennsylvania, so you can look into them, and their mouth calls sound great. Other than that, I generally use Woodhaven. I have more Woodhaven than anything, but I think with the Cluck, I'm gonna buy a few more of these because I really like them, and we're just gonna test this one out this spring and see how it works out. So whenever you're thinking about a mouth call, there are a ton of different cuts, a whole slew of cuts. Okay. You have something like this. You got a bat wing type. There's just so many different types of cuts, and they all will work a different way because they vibrate differently than the other cut. So you have to really sort of pick and choose which ones you think sound the best for you, what kind of cuts. And that just takes time, and it takes a little effort to figure out which one you can run the best. For me, these V-cut types, to me, they sound the best because they're the exact raspiness that I'm looking for. I can make them high, I can make them low, I can make it an in-between, and they all produce the same kind of sound that I'm looking for, that I feel like a tom wants to hear. What does that mean, what a tom wants to hear? Not only am I calling for a tom, but I'm also calling for the boss hen, if there's a boss hen around, which there usually is. I'm trying to either match what she's doing, like her yelps, her cuts, her clucks. I am going to be louder than her. I'm going to produce the same sound, but I'm going to be more aggressive with it if she's in the zone. That way, I'm trying to make her so mad that she's going to come look for me and put me in my place. If that does happen, there is a chance that gobbler is going to be right behind her because she is in charge. She's the most dominant hen. Therefore, that's pretty much what that tom wants to mate with at that point. He'll mate with other hens too, but she's the boss. She gets first pickings just like a boss tom does. Okay. Something else to consider is when you're using calls, you're trying to reverse nature. Turkeys gobble in order to get the hen to come to them. Whereas you as a hunter, and I know we've already covered this, but it's just a reminder, you as a hunter, you're trying to reverse nature by calling the gobbler to you. Hens usually go to the gobbler after they gobble in the mornings. So just keep that in mind when you're setting up, when you're moving into the roost, when you're out scouting, you want to find these pockets of hens and the pockets of males. You want to, I try to find somewhere in between where I know they're probably going to converge at some point. And that's where patience sort of comes into play. And you know, you'll figure it out. You'll start seeing it. The more you get out in March, the better off you're going to be, because you're going to see how they sort of react to each other's calls. And you'll see the hens just sort of fly down from the tree, and they'll start heading in the direction of that the most mature gobbler in the area, because they want to mate. That's their whole purpose in life, is to make more babies. So how does it work? How do I use a mouth call? Well, when I first started, I had a Primos piggyback Sonic Dome mouth call, and I had a CD that came along with it called Mastering the Art of Turkey Calling, and I listened to it all the time. Nowadays, there's some really good stuff out there. You got YouTube. You have people that are experienced in the Fort Hood Turkey Hunters group. There's so many apps out there that you can download. Scott Ellis makes a great app called Turkey Tech. Turkey Tech is a really good app to hone in on your calling. Not only does it have live turkey sounds, it has a world champion turkey caller calling for you and showing you how to do it. And you can just replay it over and over, and you try to match his calling. That is probably the best way to get good at mouth calling, is just trying to mimic whatever sound a hen is making. And it does take practice. Anything that you do takes practice. So just keep that in mind. Patience is a virtue when it comes to learning a mouth call. You're not going to get it overnight. It'll take a few seasons, but the more you do it, the better off you're going to be. For today, I'm going to use this Woodhaven, the Hunting Public call. And I believe this is the alpha call. I'm not real sure, to be honest with you. It came with the 3-pack. But in order to use a mouth call, it has to be put into your mouth correctly. This is supposed to fold up into the top of your mouth, the very top. Okay? It's supposed to sit on the top of the roof of your mouth, and you're supposed to hold it in place with your tongue. Okay? If you're not using it, so it doesn't get too floppy and too warm and too wet, because you can overuse the call and it's going to start sounding like crap. You got to let it dry out. That's why I have so many. So the longer it's in your mouth, the more soft it's going to get because of the heat. So just keep that in mind whenever you buy mouth calls. If you're going to buy one, buy more than one. If you want to use the same kind of call, buy the same kind of call. But eventually, if you start using a mouth call for too long, without letting it sort of cool off a little bit, then it's going to get sort of soggy and soft. Okay. But popping it in the top of your mouth, and then push it up with the top of your tongue. And I don't want to like go into my mouth and try to show you. I'm just going to try to explain this the best you can. So let's go ahead and pop it in the top of my mouth. I'll start by putting it on top of my tongue, and I'll push it in the top of my mouth. Is it all the way to my teeth? No. Is it sort of centered? Somewhat. Is it too far back? Absolutely not. You're going to choke. So make sure it's sort of forward and pushed up against the roof of your mouth with your tongue. It should create a seal. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to create an air seal in between your tongue and the roof of your mouth. Okay? There should be a tight seal where anytime that you blow out, the air is going to travel in between your tongue and the diaphragm call. That is what you're aiming for. And that's the first sound that I want you to practice if you have a mouth call, is that sound. So we're going to just blow air. Now that air is just escaping underneath the diaphragm and in between my tongue, and the air is just creating that sound, and I'm pressing up on the diaphragm call to make that high pitched sound. The harder you press, the higher the sound. The more relaxed your tongue, the lower the sound. For instance, high. That's a lot of pressure. Low, not as much pressure. Okay? Practice those two, and then practice all the ranges in between. Practice the pressure of your tongue to the actual mouth call on the top of your mouth. Relax tongue. Pressure. Okay? So the more pressure you apply to this thing, the higher it's going to go, and you can control the sounds with pressure. So now that you practiced with that, if you feel like you're going to choke, that call is too far back in the top of your mouth. You need to push that thing forward, and your tongue, the tip of your tongue needs to barely go past this mouth call. Just a tid. There are times where I'll move my tongue back. Let's say this is my tongue, right? I mean, it's just barely past. It's just barely past the mouth call. Okay, and I'm pushing against this latex in order to achieve the sounds that I want. Okay, and that's how I'm using my tongue to create those sounds, if that makes sense. And then you can start working on your frequency. You can start working on your cadence. And then you can start working on some of the more technical things, which is moving your mouth in order to achieve the sounds that a turkey makes. And we'll get to that here in a minute. So the most basic sound that you can obviously make in the turkey woods is the yelp. The yelp is the most widely known and most commonly used sound in the woods by turkey because there's generally more hens than there are males. Okay, so yelping. The easiest way I can explain to somebody to use a mouth call when yelping is you go chalk. That's what you're trying to mimic whenever you say or make the sound. Chalk, 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 chalk. Chalk, chalk, chalk. That's what you're using your jaw to make the sound go up and down. That's called inflection and deflection. So here's an example. Chalk, 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 chalk. Am I saying chalk? No. I am just using that an example as an inflection and deflection, the rise and fall of your voice or the yelp. You see my chin moving, my jaw is moving. And that's how that's how I'm doing it right now. If you're going to talk, guess what? You're using your jaw. And that's just the same as a turkey, as a yelp. Chuck, 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 chuck. Yelp, 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 yelp. The more jaw movement, the louder you're going to be. And the more rise and fall of the sound you're going to get out of your call. Okay, and that's how a yelp is made. Yelp, yelp, yelp. Okay, chalk, chalk, chalk. It's just like using any other call, right? It's like a box call. Chalk, 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 chalk. It's the same cadence and it's the same movement, same pressure of your tongue and using the same cadence and your jaw to make the sound. So that's a higher pitch because I'm pressing harder. If I do a lower pitch, I'm not pressing real hard, but it's the same cadence, right? It's the same tone that I'm using. Okay. Higher frequency, it's going to go out further. Lower frequency, it's not going to go out as far. So just keep that in mind whenever you practice your yelping. Now, if you didn't realize, your mouth is sort of like a valve, and so is a diaphragm call. It's a valve as well. But your mouth is more of the valve than anything to make the sound go up and down. For instance, okay, I'm not moving my jaw whatsoever, right? So see what I'm saying? So just remember, you're going to have to, it's just like talking. You have to let the air escape out of your mouth in order to get the sound out there as best you possibly can. Don't forget cadence. Your cadence needs to be pretty consistent. Do some research on yelps and things like that and all the other turkey calls, because you don't want to do it too much, because certain calls mean certain things in the turkey woods. We'll get to that. So back to the yelp. The yelp is just a basic call to communicate with the gobbler. Hens will yelp back and forth to each other, and that's exactly what it is. It's just a communication call to say, hey, I'm here. It's, just general talk in the turkey woods amongst hens. So if you can yelp, you have a pretty good chance of calling in a gobbler, because it's the most commonly used one. Depending on how it's used and when it's used by a hen is a little different. In the mornings, you got tree yelps. Whenever they hit the ground, you got yelps. And then you have something called an assembly yelp. An assembly yelp is a really long cadence of yelping. And here's how it sounds. Okay, it's longer than the 8 notes because it's an assembly call. It's that boss hen is trying to get all these hens to come to her so they can go off and feed, because the more eyes, the better off they're going to be for predators and watching out for predators. So in the morning, you'll probably hear some very long yelps, and that is that boss hen. If you can identify that boss hen who's making that assembly call, that's the one you want to compete with for the gobbler. So the next 2 calls we're going to go over is the cluck and the cut. The cluck is a normal, everyday use of a turkey. You'll hear a hen use it all the time, especially very quietly. If you're close to hens, you'll hear them make sounds that you're like, wow, I didn't even know they made sounds like that. But the cluck is it's a content sound. If you hear them feeding, you'll generally hear them purring and clucking, all right, along the way. And then a cut is a very excited sound. The hen will make it to portray that she is either being aggressive or she is excited. Most of the time, if you want to fire up a tom, if you can cutting is probably the best way to get a bird interested in coming over to your wood. So how do you make those calls? It's real simple. You just push this up into the roof of your mouth. Sorry, I thought I heard a gobble. Push it up to the roof of your mouth, and then with a lot of pressure with your tongue, you're going to push air in between your tongue and the diaphragm. That's it, man. You just you're using your diaphragm to get that air out. And there's a lot of pressure that should be applied with your tongue. Or okay, pop, pop, pop. Now the faster you go, the more cutting you're going to do. The more in between yelps with a pop, then you're going to be clucking, okay? And you'll hear turkey, especially hens, they make sounds all the time, whether it's clucking or purring or whatever. So, one more time. The cluck. Okay? And then the cut is the same, except for you are acting like you're a bag of popcorn. Some of y'all might have heard a really high-pitched cluck that I use, and that usually starts off my sequence of calling. Let's go back to the cluck. Okay, it's almost like it's just a very high-pitched sound, right? I hear this kind of cluck more than anything, and that sort of simulates like a really excited hen. So if you can make that high pitch sound, that's just pressure against the reed, and you're spitting that air out, and you're moving your mouth to try to achieve that really high pitched sound. Now don't do that, but I'm trying to go slow. See my mouth? Okay. That works just as good as a cluck. Okay. I think it's like one level up above a cluck. A cluck should be sort of subtle and used with purring. But that is like, I throw that in between my yelps and stuff. Sort of a mixture in between an excited cluck, a little bit of cutting, and yelping. Okay. That's sort of just my little thing that I wanted to add in there. And because I don't want to sound like a boring hen, I want to sound like an excited hen that gobbler wants to come see. So I try to make myself sound real excited in order to get that gobbler to come to me. And that's how my sequence usually goes. We'll do one last calling sequence, and then we'll end it. Haven't heard a gobble since early this morning, so maybe we can do it. So just remember that inflection, deflection, making sure you don't sound the exact same every single time that you call is probably the most beneficial part about calling for turkey. So get out there, go listen for the hens, see how they talk, and listen for how different everything sounds. Nothing's really the same, and that's what you need to aim for as a turkey caller. So thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the mouth calls video, and good luck in the spring.